Okay, good morning. All right, now we're going to start class number 4 of the using Brother Chio's class notes. And I'm going to start by kind of recapping what happened at the end of the last class. At the end of the last class, I very quickly went through an analogy. Why is this? Okay. Of the Four Noble Truths using a medical analogy. And I'm going to expand upon that analogy because it's a common analogy that is used to describe the Four Noble Truths. What I said last week is, as an example of dukkha, you go to the doctor, you tell the doctor about your symptoms, you got pain, fatigue, discomfort. The doctor listens and says, yes, you are unwell. Actually, the Buddha is like the ultimate doctor and has deep understanding of not just your condition, but the human condition. The Buddha understood that we are all unwell. We are all suffering, even though we may not recognize it ourselves. I mean, yesterday I met up with a friend, hadn't seen him in 10 years. First thing he said is, hey, how you doing? I said, great. Right? And that's just one example of how we're deluding ourselves. Am I really great? Well, yes. I mean, I'm healthy. Kids are off the payroll, lots of good things happening in my life. However, fundamentally, at an existence level, there is suffering. But of course, meeting up at Starbucks, I can't tell him when he says, how you doing? I can't say, oh, suffering in existence. Okay. So we go from a conventional way, but we delude ourselves into this conventional way of thinking, yeah, things are okay. I got a good health checkup. I got, money in the bank, and everyone around me is happy. My family is happy. All is good. Actually, that is delusion. You're fooling yourself. And unless you know about your sickness, there's no way you're going to get cured unless you recognize it and acknowledge it. So the first thing to do in the path of progress, spirituality, is to recognize suffering. And I don't mean recognize suffering as in, oh yeah, I got a pain in my leg. No, I'm talking a deep, deep understanding of dukkha, of suffering. In fact, there's a sutta called the Prerequisites Sutta. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya. Now, the Samyutta Nikaya is divided into chapters, and each chapter focuses on one theme. The 12th chapter focuses on dependent origination. The 12 steps, right, that we're all familiar with. This particular sutta, the Samyutta Nikaya 12-23, the Prerequisite Sutta, expands on the 12 factors that keep us bound to samsara into the 12 factors that escape from samsara. All right, so it gives you the path. And the difference between the 12 factors that keep us bound to samsara, typically they're divided into past life, present life, future life. It's somewhat philosophical. However, the additional 12 factors that allow us to escape from samsara can all be accomplished in one life. Theoretically, in 1 hour, in 1 minute, theoretically. Now, what is the first factor of the 12 factors to escape from samsara? It is recognition of suffering, reflection on suffering, truly understanding suffering. The only way that we are going to escape from samsara is to truly understand suffering. And that's why so difficult for devas to proceed and achieve nibbana, attain nibbana, because their life is so wonderful. How can they understand suffering when their whole life is just bliss and pleasure? We're so fortunate to be here as a human existence where suffering is quite evident, always around us. Yet there's enough relief from suffering that we can actually follow the path. With suffering, a true understanding of suffering, the next step outlined in that sutta is faith. There's a faith, a belief that yes, we can escape from this suffering. It's not a life sentence. There is a way out of suffering. Faith. And that faith brings us joy. Joy brings us enthusiasm about our practice. And that enthusiasm about our practice brings a tranquility or calmness. And that brings a pleasant feeling and concentration. These are factors, when we talk about dependent origination, I'll go through these in some detail. But all of these factors I just talked about are all about preparing the mind so that whatever happens with a mind that is full of faith and enthusiasm and joy and tranquility and pleasant feeling and concentration, with a mind that is sculpted in that way, whatever comes at us, there is the ability to see things as they truly are. That's how we react to the present moment when we're on the path to enlightenment. Normally, in the normal steps of dependent origination, when something happens to us in the present moment, we react with craving and then clinging, and that's how we get trapped in samsara. However, if we can react with seeing things as they truly are, that's the way we react to the present moment, because the present moment is the most important moment there is. If we can truly react with seeing things as they truly are, then there is a possibility of dispassion, and we can proceed to disenchantment and nibbana. Right, so those are the 12 steps. I'll go through them later. But first thing, you need to understand and have a deep understanding, not a superficial understanding like, oh, I'm in pain, I stubbed my toe, but a deep to your root understanding of dukkha, that our life, existence, fundamentally has that component of dukkha. But then with proper reflection, we can turn that reflection on dukkha into liberation. And I'll come back to that theme later. Very interesting theme, turning an understanding of dukkha or experience of dukkha into liberation. Okay. The second aspect of the second noble truth is that the doctor does not just stop at the symptoms, but considers the root cause. Say your condition arises, the suffering arises due to specific causes, and unless these causes are addressed, your illness will persist. I'll share with you a story. A few months ago, my wife had a problem with her knee. Okay, so she went to an orthopedic surgeon, Sunway. Surgeon said, two options, injection or knee replacement surgery. And we left that doctor's appointment saying, we don't like either of those options. Injection is just a temporary, and we're not dealing with the root cause. And after a long journey, what we realized is probably what had happened is a couple of decades ago, she sprained her ankle, she sprained her left ankle. And because of that sprain on her left ankle, there was a slight misalignment between the shin bone and the thigh bone. And because of that slight misalignment, there was an uneven wear causing osteoarthritis. And that's what the doctor was seeing. However, that also, and so the doctor was just focused on fixing the knee. But that osteoarthritis actually caused a slight misalignment of the hip, which caused a misalignment of the spine, which caused a misalignment of the muscles. So aches and pains. Fixing the knee, yes, it would fix the immediate obvious problem, but it's not going to deal with the underlying issue. To deal with the underlying issue, you need to look at the true root causes and go into a whole system of not just exercises, but nutrition, supplements, and even mental, being aware. You know, so for example, when my wife is doing her exercises, she needs to look in front of the mirror to be aware. Because the chiropractor said, look, when you're doing that exercise, one shoulder is above the other, and that's bad. So she needs to look in the mirror and realize, okay, I need to mentally make my shoulders adjusted properly for it to work, right? Because one thing leads to another. Same thing in our lives. Suffering, one aspect of suffering they're all interconnected. We need to get at the root cause, and unless we get at the root cause, we're not going to stand any chance of addressing and fixing it. Simply addressing the superficial aspect of suffering is not going to lead to a true solution. Okay. The third aspect is neurotic cessation. The doctor assures you, you can heal. This illness is not permanent. If the right steps are taken, suddenly there's hope, faith. There is faith, there's joy, that there is a state of health that you can reach. So this state of suffering is not unchangeable. The Buddha told us time and time again, there is a path escaping from suffering, escaping from the root cause, which is craving. As we know from the dependent origination, what is the binds us to samsara? Something arises, there's craving. Immediately, tama, craving. That's what keeps us bound to samsara. That's what causes suffering. Craving for new senses, craving for new sense sensations, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. All of this craving is what binds us to samsara, is the source of suffering. You know, it's kind of funny, a joke. A Buddhist doctor got fired because when filling up the death certificate of all the patients, when it said cause of death, he wrote birth. And it's true, right? Birth is the cause of death. But we need to get to the true root cause, and that is suffering, actually suffering and ignorance are the things, but there is also a solution. There is a way out of it. And then the doctor prescribes a comprehensive treatment plan. Just as I mentioned earlier about my wife's problem with her knee, the answer is not just simply knee replacement surgery. It has to include all aspects, the exercise, the nutrition, the supplements, even the mental awareness, mindfulness. All of that needs to be part of a comprehensive treatment plan. Similarly, the Buddha laid out a comprehensive treatment plan, the Eightfold Noble Path. Okay, so I'm going to summarize. This is a quick summary of the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, it includes ordinary suffering, which is I hurt myself or I'm sad. Suffering due to change, vipranama dukkha, meaning I'm upset because I'm getting older, I'm upset because I lost a bunch of money, I'm upset because somebody left me. This is suffering due to change. But then the most deep and most fundamental, suffering inherent in conditioned existence. This is the experience of suffering that is experienced by Vipassana meditators during the dukkha stages. That everything is just falling away, disappearing. There's nothing to stand upon. There's no foundation. Everything is just dissolving. And there is this deep to your core, visceral experience of being shot by a machine gun over and over and over again, just things are just disappearing all the time. That's the suffering inherent in conditioned existence. When there is this recognition, realization of suffering built into everything, non-permanence. The origin of suffering, craving or tanha, is the root cause of suffering, leading to rebirth in samsara. Nirodha, cessation of suffering. The end of suffering is nibbana, the complete cessation in craving and clinging. Magga, the noble eightfold path, is the way to liberation, with an emphasis on sila, samadhi, and panya. Sila being moral discipline, samadhi being concentration, mental purity, panya being wisdom, insight, jnanas, knowledges, insight knowledges. So that's kind of a quick introduction to the Four Noble Truths. Later, in the Brother Keogh's book, we're going to go into a lot of detail on them, but I wanted just to do at this stage a quick introduction. Any questions on the Four Noble Truths as I've covered them? Okay. Now, we're going to do something I've never done before. We're going to do something I've never done before. When I finished up this slide, I said, that's interesting, yes. That I've talked about that many times. I've read about that many times. But there's an aspect of the Four Noble Truths that I have never explored, and I want to explore today. What I presented here is the Theravada view. Right? That's the one that we're familiar with. But there's also an interpretation of the Four Noble Truths in Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna. How is it different? And how is it the same? Fundamentally, how do our Buddhist brother schools look at those Four Noble Truths? And so I spent some time, quite a bit of time actually researching this. And that's what I'd like to present to you now. However, I have to admit, this isn't something, normally I get up here, I just talk because I'm comfortable with the topic. But when I move away from Theravada and start going into Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna, I'm much less confident. So with your permission, I'm going to actually look at notes here. Because I don't want to disrespect or misrepresent Mahāyāna or Vajrayāna. Okay? So what differences? What are the fundamental differences between Theravada and Mahāyāna to provide some context for this discussion? The doctrinal differences between Theravada and Mahāyāna, they influence how meditation is done, ethical ideals, and philosophical outlook of every tradition. One difference is the concept of liberation. Theravada emphasizes personal liberation, or arahatship, right? We all talk about attaining arahatship. That's the goal. Arahats follow the gradual path of sila, samadhi, and panya to attain nibbana. Mahāyāna emphasizes universal liberation. Bodhisattva, the ideal of the bodhisattva who aspires to Buddhahood rather than arahatship, delaying personal liberation to help all beings. The bodhisattva path is motivated by bodhicitta, the wish to awaken for the benefit of others, and includes the 6 paramitas, or the 6 perfections of generosity, morality, patience, effort, meditation, and wisdom. Now, Theravada also has what are called the paramis, right? You've probably heard of the paramis, the 10 paramis. And there's some overlap between the 6 in Mahāyāna and the 10 in Theravada. However, the paramis in Theravada are not part of the suttas. They're a later add-on. There's really no focus on what you have to perfect, what qualities do you have to perfect to become a Buddha. The focus in Theravada is on the Noble Eightfold Path, whereas in Mahāyāna, it's you want to perfect these certain qualities as a bodhisattva, right? So that's a bit of the difference between the two, is the focus on either arahatship or Theravada, and in Mahāyāna, it's bodhisattvahood. If you want to become a bodhisattva, and for the liberation of all beings. The second difference between Theravada and Mahāyāna is the nature of the Buddha. When we talk about the Buddha, we talk about the Buddha as a human who, through his own supreme effort, became enlightened and is our teacher. We respect the Buddha as our teacher who has learned something unique and is now sharing it with us. Mahāyāna sees Buddha as a cosmic, transcendent being. The Buddha is seen as much more than a historical figure. He is a transcendent, eternal being who manifests or shows up in different forms of Dharmakaya, the ultimate reality, Sambhogakaya, the celestial, blissful body, the Buddha, and Nirmanakaya, which is the physical Gautama Buddha. Now, the Mahāyāna texts also describe many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, like Amitabha, Kuan Yin, and so on, who actively intervene to help us in daily life. Now, Theravada also talk about past Buddhas, and they mention one future Buddha, Maitreya Buddha. But these are more of these past Buddhas and the future Buddha don't get involved with us. Bodhisattvas don't get involved with us. They're more of the focus is more on following his teachings rather than worshiping the Buddha in Theravada. The third difference is the nature of reality. This is very fundamental. Theravada had the Abhidhamma, we've been studying here, breaking everything into nama, rupa, and ultimate realities, experiencing these ultimate realities as part of the meditation experience. That is the Theravada view. The Mahāyāna view focuses on shunyata, or emptiness. So the Mahāyāna asserts that all phenomena, including the dhammas, are empty of inherent existence. So they introduce the concept of emptiness or shunyata, which goes beyond the Theravada analysis that asserts that all phenomena, including the Abhidhamma ultimate realities, lack intrinsic existence. So there are some schools that say even things like Nibbana or the Noble Eightfold Path, those are just empty concepts. So this is the basic difference between the two schools as a context. Can't see it because the top of the screen is kind of covered here. This is the Theravada view, this is the Mahāyāna view, and over here will be the Vajrayāna view. So the Mahāyāna view on the first noble truth is not only personal suffering, which is what we experience, 3 types of personal suffering, but also compassion for the suffering of all beings. This is how the Mahāyāna has interpreted the first noble truth. So Theravada focuses on individual suffering, birth, aging, illness, death, sorrow, lamentation, and so on. It focuses on psychological and analytical, breaking things down. Mahāyāna emphasizes universal suffering and the compassionate response to it. So emphasizing the universal suffering of all sentient beings and looks into the suffering of others. So the Bodhisattva ideal makes the alleviating of suffering and others a central duty. Whereas Theravada looks at sorting out our own suffering, Mahāyāna views it as the Bodhisattva ideal of sorting out the suffering of all beings through compassion. Origin of suffering, Theravada is on craving, tanha, but in addition to craving, tanha, ignorance of emptiness is a key cause of suffering. According to the fundamental cause, so while they recognize that, Mahāyāna recognizes that craving is a cause of suffering, they put more emphasis on fundamental ignorance. The mistaken belief of an inherently existing self and phenomena. So this leads to conceptual clinging, and the solution is realizing emptiness. Next is the role of anatta in this. Theravada say that the cause of suffering is tied to wrong identification with the self, taking the 5 aggregates of clinging as being permanent, as being pleasant, as being self. That's the Theravada view. Mahāyāna expands non-self into the doctrine of emptiness, where not only the self, but all phenomena lack inherent existence. The key to path to overcoming, according to Theravada, how do we overcome? It's renunciation, compassion, wisdom. So it's renunciation and insight. How do we get out? How do we escape from suffering? Meditation, renouncing the world, meditation, and wisdom. Whereas in the Mahāyāna view, the solution is the union of wisdom and compassion. So instead of renouncing the world completely, a bodhisattva remains engaged, using skillful means to help others transcend craving. Meditation on emptiness removes attachment, while compassion directs energy toward benefiting others. Okay. So these are the So the third Nirodha, cessation of suffering, is Nibbana. It's not just personal Nibbana, but the realization of Buddhahood where wisdom and compassion are perfected. Actually, there are some suttas in which, in the Theravada view, where they talk about how uninstructed, the specific sutta I'm talking about is the Majjhima Nikāya number 1, the Mullapraya Sutta, the root of all existence. In that sutta, the Buddha outlines how we as uninstructed worldlings think. Then it talks about how trainees think, which are people who have already attained the first degree of sainthood. Then it talks about how arahants think, and then it talks about how Buddhists think. So it compares all the different stages in terms of how the thought process works at a high level. And the difference between how an arahant thinks and how a Buddha thinks, almost nothing. Virtually identical. So in the Theravada view, there's very, very little difference between an arahant, or no difference in their understanding, just a more complete understanding for a Buddha as compared to an arahant. But they still have that same level of attainment, they're not going to be reborn, and so on. So the nature of Nibbana in Mahāyāna, it goes beyond. Nibbana is not seen as an ultimate goal in itself. Instead, the highest realization is complete enlightenment for the benefit of all others. Bodhisattva doesn't seek to personally escape samsara, but remains to help others transcend suffering. The nature of Nibbana in Theravada is absolute, real and absolute, whereas in Mahāyāna, it's understood through the lens of emptiness. Let's go through this. Magga, Noble Eightfold Path, that we are familiar with. So in the Theravada, in the Mahāyāna view, the Eightfold Noble Path is reinterpreted through the Bodhisattva path, which includes these 6 perfections, the paramitas. So they include those paramitas into the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, Vajrayāna. Here, like Mahāyāna, just like Mahāyāna, suffering is seen through the lens of emptiness, but it's also something that can be transformed into wisdom and bliss. That's the Vajrayāna view. So they added tantric. Tantric are rituals that allow suffering to be transformed into bliss. So samsaric suffering arises due to mistaken perception, not seeing emptiness. But bliss and suffering are not inherently separate. Suffering can be transformed into wisdom through tantric practices. Instead of merely renouncing dukkha, Vajrayāna practitioners aim to transform suffering into a path of awakening through methods like deity visualization, imagining themselves as being God and having the qualities of that God, mantra recitation, and energy work, the energy channels in the body, working with the chi and the chakras, breath control, things like that. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the Requisite Sutta in Theravada, they also say, hey, reflect the first step on escaping from the dependent origination is actually reflecting on suffering. So suffering is actually the seed for renunciation, for enlightenment. So there is a slight overlap here where taking suffering and transforming it into wisdom is part of both traditions, the Theravada and the Vajrayāna. But in Vajrayāna, this involves certain ritual practices. Next, the origin of suffering, not only craving, but the dualistic perception, separating self from others, sustains samsara. Nirodha, the cessation of suffering is Buddhahood, but this is seen as already present, the Buddha nature within all beings, waiting to be realized. So in the Vajrayāna view is Nibbana is already inside of us. We just have to realize it and recognize it. It's not outside of us. Theravada is a similar view. Theravada, what is Nibbana? Nibbana is an object of the mind. It's not a place, as Brother Albert mentioned, it's not a building down there. Like Brahma, that's not a building, it's not a place that you go to. Nibbana is an object of consciousness. That of a supernormal mind. The mind that takes, so the mind takes that as an object, it is internal in that aspect. But the Vajrayāna say it's within all beings, waiting to be realized. On the path includes the Noble Eightfold Path, but the Bodhisattva path, but it also puts in all these tantric methods, such as the deity visualization, mantra recitation, yogic practices, the energy, working with energy, breath control, going the chi and the prana, chi and prana are linked, the wisdom are linked. Okay, so any general questions? Because if you have any specific questions, I'm going to claim ignorance. But if you have any general questions on comparing the Four Noble Truths in the different traditions. I want to give a very brief introduction here. Didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I thought it was an interesting to understand a little bit better. And later we'll do the same thing for the Noble Eightfold Path. When we list out the Noble Eightfold Path, we'll go through each of those different path factors and look at them from a Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna perspective. Yes.
For my understanding of Mahāyāna, the great Anari Sutta,
Okay.
which explains about the dietary children, that one is the most important one. So in that sutta, one king or the Buddha is previous Buddha. So it's a previous Buddha manifest as a Bodhisattva in front of Buddha. That's Buddha. So one in that talk about his cultivation, then Buddha Ananda said, "Oh yes, just convert him." So that they call it the great Dharma, where the average knowledge is written there, and then why he vegetarian or that is in the internet you can find it, So that is a major difference between the Theravda and the Mahāyāna. But it's a concept of Bodhisattva. Mahāyāna is they are enlightened beings. Then they come and help and salvage people. They are not. Bodhisattva is the one working towards become Buddha as well. Theravada is concerned.
Right.
So in this case of Mahāyāna, they also use that. So that Theravada, there are two meaning Bodhisattva.
Okay.
So everybody wants to make a Bodhisattva. So I want to become a Bodhisattva, which means I want to become a Buddha, but I'm not Buddha. So I'm looking to it. And their Buddha can come into this world, the ex-Buddha.
The ex-Buddha.
Can come in. So there are countless number of Buddha.
Right.
Everything. So, but some people come down.
Yeah.
But they cannot come down because Buddha is there. There's only one Buddha at one time. So that Buddha choose to manifest as Bodhisattva, honestly,
Okay.
And that sutta makes it very clear.
Okay.
The one is internet.
You're way out of my area. I haven't studied that, so I can't comment on it.
Yes.
But the whole idea of external Buddhas or Bodhisattvas coming and helping us, that is very much of a Mahāyāna view.
Yes, correct.
Very much of a Mahāyāna view, not in Theravada.
Correct.
In Theravada, the Buddha was a wonderful teacher who was parinibbana, not coming back.
In Mahāyāna, what Java got six the one place. They have another four place.
Okay.
The first plane is Arahant. Second plane is the Arahant, then you have the Bodhisattva Buddha.
Okay.
Then they have the Bodhisattva. Then they have the Buddha. So they have 10, they say 10 form of it maintains the project. Lift out the project, the lift out is 6 ranks,
6 rounds up to 10.
then they add another 4.
Right.
So they put the Buddha, this 4 is considered to them is like the pure God in the first one is the pure God, we call it. So they put their Bodhisattva higher than Arahant, Pacceka Buddha is just below Buddha. And then whoever study Mahāyāna will know. That is the way. And they have a picture on remake. And they put a heart here, 6 dragons. So they try to say we have to cultivate from one level to the next level. So first, Theravada, I don't use the word Dara. Theravada, tak cukup lagi. Because they contain self-enlightenment, but they don't have what they call the compassion.
They don't have
This is it tak cukup. Then the Pacceka Buddha, higher than the so-called because self-enlightenment, the one who tak cukup. Still need to lack of compassion because he didn't have Buddha didn't go start teaching people. And Bodhisattva people, they are 49 Mahāyāna, they are so many Mahāyāna, they save everybody. And I will be the last one to go to the Nirvana. That means I must save all sentient beings. Because there are many Bodhisattvas. That means I will be the last one. Without having all the beings being saved, I won't achieve my full enlightenment. And that is the Bodhisattva. So whoever studies the Bodhisattva, they will know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So all this is look at the fundamental, the concept of Buddha, concept of Bodhisattva, and that one is with the medium fire, but luckily Buddhists don't declare one. Yeah.
Now, again, I guess the key theme here is that Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna, Theravda all respect the Four Noble Truths, but have slightly different interpretations. Whereas compassion and emptiness, and more here the focus is on, in Vajrayāna, is on the tantric practices, the things like yogic practices or imagining yourself as a certain deity. So those are some fundamental differences. However, Four Noble Truths remain as the core of each of the traditions. Okay, now move into the Noble Eightfold Path, and I'm going to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. The Noble Eightfold Path ending all suffering. Let's first look at it from the perspective of spiritual development in daily life, not as a meditative. Right view, cultivate an understanding of cause and effect, or karma, and the nature of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, anicca, dukkha, anatta, at a conceptual level. Recognize that, yeah, there is impermanence, there is suffering, there is no core self. To see life's challenges as opportunities for wisdom. So the anicca, dukkha, anatta leads to addressing lobha, dosa, and moha. There's more clarity and balance in one's life because of right view in a daily existence. All right, so going through daily life with right view, see things. The way that I look at it is, what would an arahat do? Again, the Theravda. What would an arahat do in this situation? So in facing a situation, I look at it and I try to put myself in the shoes of what I imagine an arahat would think. And that's how I guide myself. Right intention, daily life, align your thoughts with renunciation, goodwill, non-harming, ensuring that your daily motivations are rooted in wisdom and compassion. Recognize that we are creatures of habit. We behave the same way again and again and again because we have all these habits. Some of them bad habits, some of them good habits. And looking at those habits from the perspective of lobha, dosa, moha, attachment, aversion, and delusion. Look and say, all right, am I acting out of a habit of attachment? Am I always greedy for things, or not just greedy for money, but greedy for trying new dishes, trying new experiences? That's an example of greed as well. Aversion. Am I working out of a habit of not accepting? Non-acceptance, that's aversion. Am I looking at things the right way? Or am I deluded in the way I'm looking at things? Do I truly understand what's going on? I'm talking about in daily life. I'm not talking about in meditative practice. I'll talk about meditative practice later. But first, in daily life, look at how lobha, dosa, moha affect your daily life. Look at your habits. This is like when in the Kalama Sutta, when the Kalama said, look, we're hearing all these different teachers. We're always giving us these different teachings. How do we know what's right? They went to the Buddha with this question, And the Buddha said, look to yourself. What do wise people say? Is greed, aversion, and delusion, do they lead to good or bad? He said, oh, they lead to bad. Non-greed, non-aversion, understanding, wisdom, do they lead to good or bad? They lead to good. Okay, there's your guide. So in terms of intention, make sure that you're downgrading the unwholesome habits and upgrading wholesome habits in daily life. Right speech. Speak truthfully, kindly, meaningfully, using words that support others rather than to deceive or harm others. That is how we can practice right speech in daily life. Social harmony comes out of right speech. And when I mention speech, I include writing, posting on Facebook, all those are all different aspects of speech, right? So use them for social purposes of social harmony, uplifting and supporting others. Right action. Live ethically by avoiding harm, dishonesty, exploitation, so your actions support inner peace and well-being of those around you. Keeping precepts is not only good for you, it's good for others in daily life. If I avoid cruelty and killing, not only is it good for me, it's good for the others around me. If I avoid stealing, it's good, not only good for me, it's good for those around me, right? And so on. So right action, living ethically, will help social harmony. Right livelihood, engage in work that aligns with ethical principles, avoiding professions that cause suffering, and use your livelihood as a means to cultivate generosity and integrity. Right effort, continually guard the mind by abandoning unwholesome states and cultivating wholesome ones, maintaining a steady and balanced inner wisdom. It takes effort to keep the mind pure. Constant effort to maintain the balance in the mind between overexerting and being lazy. So this is the kind of right effort in daily life. Right mindfulness. Maintain moment-to-moment awareness of thoughts, emotions, body sensations, using daily life as a field for insight and self-understanding. Practicing daily mindfulness, it's amazing what one can experience in the moment of sweeping the floor, a conversation, being aware of when you speak, of what's in your mind, and what is the reaction of the other person. There's so many aspects of right mindfulness. It's not only awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations, but the awareness of others as well. Coming back to social harmony. Right concentration. Develop a steady and focused mind that is free from distraction, allowing for deep clarity and equanimity in all situations, a calmness, a centeredness that allows focus, unification of the mind on the task at hand. So now what I'm going to do is talk about the Noble Eightfold Path from the perspective of the Vipassana yoga. So far, I just talked about it from the perspective of daily life practices. Now let's talk about it from the Vipassana yoga practice. Right view. You see all experiences as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self, allowing direct insights into the nature of reality through continuous observation. This is when practicing Vipassana, right view is seeing the object first as impermanent, dissolving all the time, and that dissolving all the time leads to an understanding of the oppressive nature of that situation. This is dukkha. And the fact that we got no control over it, and there's nothing at the core, which is anatta. So this is right view in meditation. Right intention, cultivate the resolve to observe all phenomena with detachment, non-reactivity, and openness to seeing things as they are. One needs to be, from one aspect, one needs to surrender to the practice. See the openness. At the same time, one needs to step back from what is happening and be detached, non-reactive to what is happening during your meditation. This is the right kind of mental perspective on during meditation. Right speech. Restrain speech during practice. Use words skillfully to support clarity, mindfulness, and the deepening of insight. In other words, on retreat, you don't talk, except during the interview. Okay? And that includes typing on your handphone. You don't do that. That's wrong speech. Yes, there's no words, but it is incredibly distracting. And you know, some of the teachers insist you give up your handphone when you go on retreat. Yes, that's the right approach. Because I've been on retreats when I've had my handphone and it's distracting. But then when you do speak, which is during your interview, communicate to the teacher with clarity, mindfulness, and it will, that is beneficial. That is right speech. The one time that you do speak is to the teacher, and your speech to the teacher needs to be clear and mindful so that the teacher can guide you. Right action, you need to maintain impeccable moral discipline. This goes far beyond keeping precepts. It includes keeping the precepts of the retreat center. Not just the 8 precepts, not just the 5 precepts, not just the 8 precepts of abstaining from eating or singing and dancing and being on a high bed, but all the rules of the retreat center. Noble silence, for example. Okay? Because when one does this, keeps one's actions in alignment with the rules, there is no agitation, it reduces the agitation, the guilt, the disturbance that wrong actions will give. Right livelihood. Ensure that one's way of life does not create inner agitation, allowing undistracted attention to the practice of insight meditation. If your job outside the retreat center involves lying, stealing, when you get into the retreat center, you're going to carry those things in with you. All right, and it's going to create mental agitation, disturbing your practice. Great effort. Continuously apply balanced effort. Not too much, not too little. Too much effort, the mind becomes agitated. Too little effort, sloth and torpor, laziness, dullness. You have to have the right level of effort that matches with your level of concentration. Effort and concentration need to be in balance to sustain mindfulness, abandon distraction, prevent dullness or restlessness. This is right effort in the context of meditation. Right mindfulness, maintain precise and continuous noting of the mental and physical phenomena, allowing direct insight into their arising and passing away. Mindfulness needs to be continuous. In the Vipassana, it starts with the effort to make mindfulness continuous. From continuous mindfulness comes concentration. Not like in samatha. Samatha, concentration, effort to do concentration. In vipassana, effort to continuous mindfulness. Continuous mindfulness naturally leads to concentration. And that concentration, together with the mindfulness, lead to the insights, the content. So, like mindfulness is precise and continuous noting of all phenomena, direct insight. Right, concentration is developing in the vipassana context, is developing momentary concentration, kanika samadhi, momentary concentration through mindfulness. Stabilizing awareness without clinging to tranquility. And kanika samadhi is very dynamic, it's constantly moving because objects are constantly moving and changing. So this is not like jhana or samatha meditation where concentration is fixed and absorbed moving into the object. Here we're talking about a very light. I don't mean light as in superficial, I mean light as in agile. Mindfulness is constantly going around the object and experiencing it at different angles and seeing the same object from different aspects. This is right concentration in the context of vipassana meditation. Okay. Now, in the next class, I will continue on. I've got a couple more analogies. Thank you. Oh, I started a little late, so I'm going to go through this one analogy. One analogy. All right. Sailing ship. Imagine life as a perilous sea voyage toward a distant radiant island of Nibbana. So we're going to get on the boat that's going to take us to Nibbana. Each aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path becomes an essential, interconnected element of navigating this journey. So we're going to talk now about, in this journey on this boat to Nibbana, what role each of the path factors play. Right view, the voyage begins with accurate charts and a reliable compass. These tools represent right view, understanding the true nature of reality. So there are storms or suffering and calm seas as peace. Without right view, the ship drifts aimlessly, misled by illusions like mirages or fog. So right view, the role of right view on our journey, it's the compass and the charts. Compass tells us which direction we're going. Charts tell us where we are. Right? Both are important, and they both come from right view. Right intention, the captain of the ship, which is ourselves, resolves to steer toward the island, embodying right intention. This is the unwavering commitment to ethical and compassionate goals, avoiding detours into attachment, aversion, and delusion, recognizing that there's always these stuff coming up, attachment coming up, aversion coming up, delusion coming up, but we're going to avoid that. We're going to go right to the direction, committed. So the wheel, we're at the steering wheel of the boat, is set with purpose, aligning actions with the destination. Steering towards the destination. You know, we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, and in Pali it says sama, sama. They're all the word noble or right is sama, but sama, the word sama, has more meanings than just right, not just correct, but it means harmonious and aligned with the direction of Nibbana. This is what makes right view, right intention, right speech, right action, all right. It's not just that they're not wrong. It's not just they're correct, but they are harmonious and aligned with the ultimate destination of Nibbana. Everything has to be aligning everything with the destination. Okay, right speech. The crew's clear, honest dialogue mirrors right speech. Gossip or deceit would fray trust. Just like harsh words might incite mutiny. Harmony depends on truthful, kind communication that unifies or unites everyone toward their shared goal. So right speech is critical on this journey, so that everyone works as a cohesive team. Right action, the sailors adjust the sails and ropes, care, reflecting right action. Every movement is intentional, avoiding harm, loose rigging, upholding integrity, like securing knots, maintaining the ship's ethical course through turbulent waters. So all the actions of the crew are aligned with arriving at the destination. Right livelihood, each crew member's role, navigator, cook, lookout, must honor the voyage's purpose. Right livelihood means no one is engaged in tasks that sabotage the journey, such as smuggling contraband. All work sustains and dignifies the collective mission. Right effort. When storms hit, the crew tirelessly repairs sails and bails water, embodying right effort. Perseverance prevents backsliding. They cultivate resilience, mending tears in the sails, discard complacency, discarding rotten ropes, ensuring progress despite resistance. Right mindfulness, the watchful lookout symbolizes right mindfulness. They observe the waves, the wind, the stars without judgment, alerting to shifting conditions. Awareness of the present, back in the past, mass or change in the current, prevents disaster, deepens connection with the voyage. Always looking in the right direction ahead. Right concentration, the captain's unbroken focus on the horizon is right concentration, always looking ahead. Amid distractions such as siren songs, crashing waves, the helm stays fixed. This singular focus merges mind and purpose, channeling all efforts toward the island ahead. Now, Nirvana, the island, the destination, emerges not as an endpoint. It's not just a destination, but the culmination of each mindful choice. Everything that goes along, all fears toward. Storms still rage, there's still suffering. But the crew, guided by wisdom, ethics, and discipline, navigates with skill and unity. So in this journey, enlightenment is both the path and the shore, revealed through the voyage itself. Nobly, the Eightfold Path is the art of sailing a life untethered from suffering, steered by clarity, compassion, unyielding presence. The Eightfold Path ensures safe passage through the turbulent waters of samsara. You'll notice that I talked a lot about social dynamics and compassion in here, even though, from a Theravada perspective, there is overlap with the Mahāyāna view of compassion. It's just not given the same kind of prominence and perspective as the Mahāyāna. Okay. Any questions on these analogies? Yeah, sorry.
That's why you share on the what is this model for the
Yeah, for landing.
On this mission and action, right? This way, I think most of us, and we face situation on a crossroad. On one hand, on the help. On the other hand, we think about it, there's crime. So I do that. Well, how do we do the balance? Wisdom and passion.
One of the things that the Buddha said in one of the suttas is that if you are stuck in mud up to your shoulders, you're not going to be able to help other people out of the mud. Now, this is not to say that, again, this is the Theravada view, right? It's not to say that one should completely not have any compassion for others. Many times today, I talked about social harmony, I talked about working together with others. But the focus really has to be on, helping yourself, and by helping yourself, you're also helping others. if one puts the others first, they hold you back and down. That's my view. Not to say that compassion is not important, but make sure it comes from the right place. Get a strong sense first. At least that's my perspective. Mahāyāna, they have a different, likely have a very different perspective on this. I respect that. Sharing just my personal view.
Yeah. My question is
Yeah.
So actually, the crews are the people Cetasika. Who are not with the Cetana as the captain and the Sakti as the supervising officer.
Okay. It's gonna be hard to go through all 52 of them and figure out when they fit on the boat, but okay.
You got 52 crew, okay? One of them is the captain. Captain is the Cetana. Then you have the Sakti have to be the supervising and so the on guard.
It's not, okay.
But the Cetana have is the captain. But
The one who sets the direction is volition. Cetana.
yes.
All right, it's the one that sets the direction. The focus is ekagata. The direction of the focus, all right, is manisikara.
So that
They,
is
they all work together.
right?
They all of those cetasikas work as a team. And what from meditation experience, looking at how they work as a team, they can be coordinated, all beautifully coordinated on the team toward a common focus. Sometimes they are disorganized. This talks about the relative strength of the cetasikas in the mind at that moment. I don't see, they'll each of the equal path has a corresponding cetasika. I don't see it as a link to the journey on the boat. That's pushing it a little bit far.
Because in a boat, in a journey, you have the captain, then you have the plotter.
Okay. I would say the captain is the consciousness, is the vijnana.
Yeah.
Okay, it is the leader. Everything gets reflected through the captain.
Yes.
That's why, for example, and just to give you a simple analogy, we talk about Chittanupassana, right? Where that type of awareness of consciousness. Consciousness is the leader of all the cetasikas, the forerunner, and that's why when you take a look from distance at what's going on in the mind, the first thing one sees is the consciousness of the chitta. Okay, they're all there. Yeah, they're all.
Yes. So in the captain is the Chittasika, behind is the key. Without the Chitta, we can have Chittasika.
Okay.
So
When we talk about, who do we say in 1492 sailed to America? We say Christopher Columbus. However, it wasn't just him, right? There was a whole crew behind him. Each had their own role, but we identify Christopher Columbus as the leader of that team. All right, and then we see everything through Christopher Columbus as the team leader, and so he will be vijnana, the consciousness, and in the mind. Yeah.
Short one. Regarding this Mahāyāna, there's a very good book, I think, I'm going to go about the teaching of the Buddha.
Yeah.
And that there's not something about emptiness to Nirvana.
Yeah.
What a lot of people among the mindfulness, they misunderstood that emptiness is nothingness. So actually, when I read it, and after attending Abhidhamma, I read that book, I found that it's anatta, conditionality. So it's actually not. It's just great how the mind presents
That is a common Theravada perspective that, oh, all this sunyata stuff is actually anatta. All right, that is a common perspective.
We understand Abhidhamma. And then talk about the flower. The flower. You take only one permission. Very beautiful. The book is very lively.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Regarding the Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna, the teaching of Theravda is quite different.
Yeah.
It's all because of Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna created by the Hindu. Created by the Hindu. Initially, the Hindu Brahmin tend to join in order. They confused with that teaching.
Okay, here is the history. Here is the history. Buddha, 500 BC, right? And after the Buddha, it was kind of a very minor, kind of pocketed religion in India at that time. Quite a minor way of thinking. Until 250 years later,